These are interviews with Lorraine, Stanek, Dunteman, and Irene, Stanek, Karlzen, two sisters from Bohemia. They grew up on the south side of Chicago in a place called Grand Crossing, Illinois. Chicago was a very diversified city. People from all over the world would come and settle in Chicago. Polish, Bohemian, Italian, Irish, they all eventually came to the great city of Chicago. Most of the Bohemians settled on the south side of Chicago, Blue Island area, also south side Grand Crossing, and in Berwyn, Illinois. A family called the Staneks came over from Bohemia in the late 1800s, and they settled on the south side of Chicago in Grand Crossing, Illinois. They purchased property at 77th and Drexel Avenue, kitty corner from Hirsch High School. Of course, back then, the high school didn't exist. It was basically open farm country. On 76th and Drexel Avenue, they built a two-story white house where the entire family could live. They built a store. They had a barn. It was basically a farm. As seen here, the grandparents of Lorraine and Irene soon grew a large family, which included Edward and Elby. Elby and Edward were married in July of 1924 and soon started a family. Edward, Lorraine, and Irene. The one Stanek family lived on the south side of Chicago. The other family lived on the north side of Chicago until they moved to Atkinson, Nebraska. Most of the Stanek family stayed at 76 and Drexel Avenue in Grand Crossing, Illinois. Edward, Lorraine, and Irene all grew up on the south side of Chicago. This is a living history of the Stanek family.
Tenkrát tak jako dnes Vltava tekla vdál, svou píseň hůčel je, já srdce své ti dal. Tenkrát tak jako dnes zvonu zněl teskný hlas, že odletí ten lásky sen, kdo tušil jen to zná. Jen škoda na stokrát, kde je ten krásný čas.
Irene, Antoni, Karlzen, Stanek. I don't know why it was named Irene. The Antoni was Grandma in Nebraska's name. And of course the last name, the married name and maiden name. So it's nice. I have no idea why they named it Irene. I have no idea.
Do you know why they named it?
No, I don't know why I was named Lorraine. Frances was after my Aunt Frances, I'm sure. my confirmation name was Anna, which was after my grandmother out in Cloverdale. And Stanek, of course, was our name. And then I married a Dunteman. So that's how I got my name is Lorraine Frances Anna Stanek Dunteman. And I was born in the house in Chicago at 7654 South Drexel. They didn't go to hospitals at the time when I was born. By the time I was born, I was born in Jackson Park Hospital.
So you were born in the house, so
Yes.
there was no such thing as maternity wards back.
No, I'm sorry, I'm before the times. So.
Okay.
No, I was born at home, and I guess they had what they called a midwife that would come to the house. So, and I was born in that house, and that's where my parents lived all their married life until after my dad died, and then we moved Grandma out to the farm next to us in Barrington.
Now, if there was one other child that Grandma and Grandpa had, or Albie had, Stanek.
Not that I know
No?
of. Edward. Well,
No.
the oldest son, or the only son they had was Edward.
And how older was he compared to you guys?
Edward was about 3.5 years older than me. And there's not quite 7 years between us.
And where did he move to California when?
He lived in Chicago until after he was out of school, and he went to a junior college for a little while, and then he went out to California after several years and to visit, and he found out they could transfer his job from the post office in Chicago out to California, and then he moved out to Long Beach. I don't know what year that was. No, I don't either. It was sometime after I was married in 50, so it probably was 56, 57. It could be.
No, your mom and dad had family, brothers and sisters. So let's start with Edward. And who were his brothers and sisters?
That would be Uncle Frank in Nebraska, Uncle George, my dad, and Aunt Eleanor. And she was married to a Moore, John Moore. Uncle Frank never got married. Uncle George married a woman named Cecilia, and they got divorced, and then he married Viola. That was later on.
And then Albie's brothers and sisters were
Aunt Francie, Aunt Mary, Uncle Jaime, Uncle Jim, Uncle Frank, and Uncle Johnny. Is there anybody else? I think that's it, isn't it?
and Uncle Johnny was adopted?
Adopted. He was a Buddish, Buddish was Grandma's maiden name in Chicago. The grandma in Chicago's maiden name was Buddish, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So then Albie's grandmother and grandfather's names were
James and Anna, or just Ann. Anna.
and they were the ones that had the store
In Chicago.
in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And
It was equivalent to what a 7-Eleven would be today, except they had everything in big barrels in the store, and they had bananas hanging on in a big bunch like you see them growing. And if someone came in and wanted a banana, they just cut down the number of bananas a person wanted and sell them to them. Everything else was in these big, like 55-gallon drums. And Grandpa would go to South Northern Market every day with his horse and buggy and pick up all the produce and everything that he needed for the store. And on his way back from South Water Market, he'd go through the alleys in Chicago from downtown out to 7700 South. And he would sell this on the way back. Sometimes by the time he got back to the store, it was all gone. He'd have to go back to South Water Market again the next day and pick up another load because he had nothing left to sell in the store because people would just buy it right off the wagon when he came through the alley.
Well, let me ask, this is a question that Joan had, so I'm going to ask you this. How did you keep, like, milk and meat and all that stuff fresh and not spoil? And, like, fruits and vegetables?
The Iceman Iceman used to bring block ice in the refrigerator. There was a pan in there, and you dripped down, you had to empty the pan underneath that. I remember.
Well, what about in the
If
store?
you needed ice for your ice box, as we called it in those days, you had a sign. That was a little square sign, and it had 25, 50, 75, and 100 in the corners. And you put this part up for the number of pounds of ice you thought you would need for your ice box. When the Iceman came through the alley, he would take a big chunk of ice, and if you only needed 50 pounds instead of 100, he'd cut it in half with his ice pick, and then bring it in and dump it in your ice box. And that's how you kept your food cold. That was before we had any electric refrigerators. And then you'd have to make sure you check the pan underneath. There'd be so many hours or a day or a half a day or whatever, and dump the water out, because as the ice melted, the water went into that pan.
Now, how much did it cost you for a block ice?
I have no idea.
You guys don't remember?
I wouldn't know. I just barely remember the Iceman.
Did it keep the meat?
If you didn't put that sign up, he would not stop and bring you ice. So if you missed him, you were out of luck. Yeah.
Now, was there fast food around when you guys grew up?
No. Well, if you want to call White Castle, by the time I went to school, where I had a quarter, spending money, that would go to White Castle, which was up on 76th in the alley, and you could get a White Castle, hot chocolate, a piece of pie for your quarter.
Now, do you guys remember any prices back then of certain things that you could mention? How much, like gas cost or?
Well, I don't know what gas cost, but it cost us a nickel to go to a show on Sunday afternoon. Yeah, for a quarter. Oh, you could go to the show and get popcorn and some candy.
So you don't know the cost of any, like, how much food was, or
no, I would have
cars
no idea.
or anything like that? You don't remember any of that?
Idea.
Okay.
No, I think if you went to the store to get what you call a quart of soda of some kind, it was probably a dime. Maybe not even that. Yeah.
So then Edwards, George's, Ellie's, and Frank Jr.'s dad and mom were who?
Yeah, it was Nebraska, Frank Stanek Sr. and Tony.
And they, Frank Stanek Sr. was the brother of
James Stanek here in Illinois.
And they were first generation. So
yes.
Actually they weren't first generation, they were immigrants.
They were immigrants.
So explain how those two brothers came to this country.
I don't know.
Do you know, Aunt Larry?
Their brother John came to this country first, and he settled in Berwyn or Cicero, and then he brought the brothers, and I believe he brought his two sisters also. So the two brothers, Frank and James, and two sisters, and I can't remember their first names, but they all came here from Czechoslovakia, and I believe that their brother John bought their transportation over here for them. They came on boat, of course. So you rode on a boat for 30 days across the Atlantic.
I remember Grandma saying, my mom saying that when Grandma came, she had a piece of bread and a piece of cheese, and I guess like a little cauldron or whatever kind of bowl type of some soup. But she had an abscess tooth or a toothache or something. She was so sick all the way over. I remember my mom talking about that. And then she came in Baltimore. She didn't come in Ellis Island. Is that true?
I don't know. I
That's
don't
what
know where
I
they
thought.
landed.
Mom said that she didn't come in. She came in Baltimore.
I don't know where they landed, but they came to Chicago because their brother John was here. And he helped them get settled in Chicago.
And did John bring over his dad and mom also?
I think he brought his parents over here when they were quite elderly because they're buried at Bohemia National Cemetery.
So that would be your great grandma and grandpa.
Yeah.
And what were their names? Do you remember?
I think it was John and I don't know if it was Emily or Amelia. I don't remember.
Yeah.
But I know they were way up in years because John couldn't have been too young when he brought his brothers and sisters over.
Okay, then what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about Marvin's side and Dad's side of the family to give a lineage type of thing. Yeah, Lorraine, what could you explain Marvin's side of the family, the brothers and sisters, back to as far as you can go to Grandma and Grandpa? And
Marvin's side of the family, he had one sister, a couple years younger than him, and he had one brother about 7 years younger. And his parents, they lived on a farm on the corner of Army Trail and Roselle Road, or Bloomingdale Road as it's called when it gets farther south. And at that time when I met him, his grandparents were still living, and that was his dad's parents, and they had moved off the farm, I guess, several years before that, and moved to a house in Bloomingdale. And the grandfather passed away shortly after I met Marvin, so I didn't really know him too well. His mother's grandfather, I met him unbeknownst to me that it was Marvin's grandfather. He used to be the caretaker in the Forest Preserve Woods in Bloomingdale where Aunt Mary used to take us hiking. He was a very short person, kind of petite, and I found out later that was his grandfather that was the caretaker in those woods. I didn't know his mother's mother at all. And Marvin's mother passed away when she was 56 years old of cancer, and Marvin's dad lived until he was 82, and then he had emphysema.
And what were their names? Do you recall?
Her name was Ella, E-L-L-A, and his name was Edwin.
And do you remember the great-grandfather and grandmother?
One of the grandfathers was Bill, and the other one was George. And I can't remember which was Dunteman and which was Edecker. I should know it real well. I think it was Bill Edecker and George Dunteman.
And E. Decker was,
was Marvin's mother's father.
and Marvin had one sister?
One sister, Elda, who is still living today, and she has macular degeneration, so she has a hard time seeing. And his sister had two children, a girl, Audrey, and a son, Dan, or Daniel. And his brother had four children, Christiana, and then Kathy. Christiana is married to a young man named Charles Repa. They don't have any family. Kathy is married to, oh, I can't think of his name, I know it real well. Anyway, they live out in Cherry, Illinois, out by Rockford, and they have two boys. And yeah, his name is Jim Horsham. And the youngest daughter, Geraldine, was married for a short time and divorced, and she died of cancer at a young age of, I believe she was only 30 or 31. And then they had a son, Jim. I'm sorry, Jim is the oldest. He was the firstborn, and he is married and has two boys and lives right next to the father on the farm on West Road in Sugar Grove. And he is going through a divorce.
What was Uncle Mar's brother's name?
Edwin Jr.
Oh, let's see, Keith's parents were Ellen and Seth Karlzen, and they both came from Sweden, so I don't know the background of the Swedish thing. Seth had one brother that lived in Geneva, and they had children, Margaret, Leonard, Keith, Larry, and Kenneth. And there's nobody left in that family except the children of Larry. The only one left of that child is Seth, but they had Diane, Kurt, and Douglas. They're all gone. Lenny had two girls and a boy, and he lived in Iowa. And Margaret had three sons, and she married a Petrie. She lived in Wisconsin. And that was Tommy, Chuck, and Bill. And Kenneth had two girls and two boys. The one girl died of Lou Gehrig's disease, Linda. Jenny Bay is married to a farmer in Ohio, and their name is Faten. I'm not sure the spelling. Kenneth was a pastor in Michigan, now retired, and John and his wife live in Sun City, Arizona. And that's about it. I don't know any of the other. If there's any grandchildren by the sons, I think the sons had some grandchildren, but I don't know. I have no idea where they are at. And that would be the whole family.
Okay. Now I'm going to ask you, describe life in Grand Crossing. Like, was it very compared to the 60s and the 70s, where it was very urban and densely populated? What was it like when you guys were growing up?
Yeah, well, mine would be different than Lorraine's because she was already, I'm still in high school. I was 16 when she got married. So it would be probably a different kind of different lifestyle, maybe not. Roller skating, when I skated in Grand Crossing Park, my best friend Marie lived right down the block. My other best friend Ella lived right across Cottage Grove.